The outer rim colony of Avarice burned in silence. Ships that once ferried grain and oxygen between mining worlds now drifted in charred pieces across the void, their crews reduced to ash. The core fleet hung in orbit like carrion birds, their formation a deliberate spectacle of dominance. Admiral Varix, tall and armored in obsidian plates, leaned forward in his command chair with the weary expression of a predator long used to easy kills. "Another nest of humans gutted," he muttered, tapping his claws against the rail. His voice carried to the bridge crew, though he wasn't speaking to them. They scatter like vermin. Nothing new. Beneath his casual contempt, the destruction played out. Escape pods spiraled through firestorms of debris, and a final surface detonation rolled across Avarice's horizon. A handful of desperate fighters clawed at the edges of the blockade, their weapons ineffective. The core gunners laughed as they swatted each one from the stars. "Permission to end this quickly, Admiral?" asked Commander Thra, one of his younger lieutenants. Her crest shimmered a proud red, signaling eagerness. Varix shook his head slowly. "Not yet. Let them struggle. It teaches them futility." On the ground, a battered human transmission tower spat static into the void. The bridge caught the signal, a ragged voice weak, almost broken. "You think you've won, but you don't understand us. You don't know what you've done." The voice crackled out, leaving only the hiss of cosmic background noise. For a moment no one spoke. Then Thra snorted. Empty threats. A dying breath from a dying world. Varix smirked, but the words lingered. There was something about the calm beneath the desperation that tasted different, though he dismissed it quickly. His empire had crushed 100 civilizations across the centuries. Humanity was no different. As the last colony beacon fell silent, the fleet turned away, charting a path deeper into human-controlled space. The map unfurled across the bridge's holo display. Dozens of pale blue spheres representing colonies, thinly defended, strung across the spiral arm, like crumbs for the taking. Varix rose, stretching the ridges of his spine. "We push further. Humans breed across too many rocks. Cut away their centers, and the rest will collapse." There were murmurs of assent. The crew carried the certainty of conquerors. Days later, at the Imperial High Command, the core council gathered within a chamber carved from black stone. Around the central dais, leaders of fleet and state reclined in curved seats, watching holographic projections of human star charts. "Reports confirm minimal resistance," a counselor droned, her voice thick with arrogance. "The species lacks cohesion. They scatter resources thinly across colonies, never protecting their heart." The council erupted in laughter at the simplicity of the campaign. Only Varix's eyes narrowed. He had seen resistance in their fighters, yes, but nothing that troubled his war-seasoned instincts. And yet, that last message still whispered at the edges of his mind. "They will fight harder if we corner them," he said, his tone even. "History teaches that prey becomes most dangerous when pressed against its nest." "Admiral," one of the counselors sneered, "you attribute too much cunning to cattle. Humanity is a fractured species, no stronger than the Miral or the Zarash, both reduced to dust under our heel. Why hesitate now, when the path to their homeworld lies open?" The chamber buzzed with ambition. Young commanders demanded honor, eager for the glory of taking Earth itself. Veterans chuckled, certain it would fall like every world before it. Varix tried again. "Earth may not be as defenseless as it appears. Their silence hides something." "Silence," scoffed another counselor, "is the whimper of the conquered." A vote was called, swift and absolute. The decision was unanimous. The fleet would strike Earth. When the order reached his ship, Varix stood before the viewport, watching stars slide past as the drive systems flared. He should have felt triumph. Instead, there was an ache beneath his armor, an echo of unease he could not shake. Approach to Earth was swift. Human defenses on the outer edge were meager. Satellites shattered with a single volley, orbital patrols torn apart before they had time to blink. Cities flickered beneath the clouds, sprawling clusters of light that seemed oblivious to the predators above them. On the bridge, Thra practically vibrated with hunger. "Their heart is soft, Admiral. Once it is pierced, the rest will rot." The first bombardments lit the atmosphere. Plasma lances carved scars across oceans. Ion storms burned through communications networks. Panic spread in the transmissions intercepted from Earth. Cries, scattered commands, confusion. Varix leaned forward, waiting for the inevitable, a plea for mercy, a surrender broadcast across every frequency. It always came, but it didn't. Instead, the chaos stilled. The signals went dark, not from destruction, but from deliberate silence. No desperate messages, no negotiations. Just a void. The bridge officers exchanged uneasy glances. "Admiral," Fra said carefully, "they're not responding." Varix's gaze hardened on the blue and green world below. The surface burned in places, yet most of it seemed untouched, vast continents still glowing with life. It was not the reaction of prey. It was something else. He rose, his voice low but sharp. "Keep firing. Test their resolve. If they are silent, we will make them scream." Another barrage rained down. Cities vanished in flames, the oceans boiled in streaks. Still, the silence remained. Then, through the comms, a single transmission broke across every channel. "Calm. Cold. You've made your mistake." The words echoed across the bridge, vibrating against the bones of every officer. No anger, no fear, just certainty. For the first time in years, Varix felt something slip under his armor, something he had forgotten in a lifetime of conquest. Doubt. The moment stretched, silent but heavy, and he knew instinctively that the war had shifted. This was not the end of a conquest. It was the beginning of something else. The transmission ended, and the bridge hung in a silence more oppressive than any explosion. Varix stood rigid, the words gnawing at him. He had faced countless enemies, and all of them had broken the same way, with begging, with defiance, with incoherent rage. Never with this. Never with calm certainty. His crew looked to him for command, their eyes unsettled, and he forced his mandibles into the semblance of a sneer. "They bluff," he said. "Continue operations." Weapons fired again, but this time something felt different. The barrages struck not empty soil or unshielded cities, but invisible barriers that shimmered briefly before swallowing the energy whole. The fleet's targeting systems blinked in confusion. On the tactical screens, coordinates that had been marked as civilian centers suddenly shifted. Entire districts, supposedly filled with helpless life, dissolved into static. The signals had been falsified. "Admiral," Fra reported, her voice tight. "These aren't cities. They're projections. Empty constructs. Their centers gone." A murmur rippled through the bridge crew. Varix's claws dug into the armrest. So the humans had prepared. Not weak, not disorganized, but deliberate. The colonies they had taken earlier, their ease, their lack of resistance, he saw it now for what it was. Not incompetence. Bait. The comms erupted again, a single human voice cutting through, level and devoid of any need to raise itself. "You've been walking the path we set for you. Every strike, every world, every skirmish recorded. We needed to know how you fight. You've been teaching us." The words slithered beneath Varix's armor more deeply than the first message. Around him, the bridge officers stiffened, their crests dimming with unease. To admit it was to give weight to the human's claim, yet already the truth flickered across their instruments. Patterns, traps, data that had been left exposed for them to take, now twisted into evidence of their own blindness. Varix felt the shift inside himself, a needle of fear pressing through the years of confidence. He masked it quickly, turning to his officers. "They trick. They cannot match the Empire's strength. Find their real defenses. Burn through them." But before a search could begin, space itself tore open near the fleet. Not with the blinding roar of a drive jump, but with a silent ripple, as though the void itself had grown a wound. From it emerged ships, human ships, but not like any his fleets had catalogued. They were angular, cloaked in matte plating that reflected nothing, their signatures ghostly, almost invisible. They moved in silence, no triumphant horns, no shouting. Just purpose. And then the first volley struck. It was not a wild, desperate spray of fire, but scalpels cut. 3 core destroyers vanished before the sensors could even register impact. No wasted shots, no grand displays. Just precision, as if humanity had marked the exact vessels to remove before the battle began. The crew of the flagship reeled. Thra's crest pulsed an anxious yellow. "Admiral, they target with impossible accuracy. They strike command before support. It's surgical. Hold formation." Varix barked. His chest fell hollow. His orders echoed against the terror creeping into his men. He saw it in their eyes, their belief in the inevitability of victory cracking. Another calm human voice pressed into the bridge, delivered without malice, without gloating. "We only remove what must be removed. Withdraw now and your lives may still have worth." Press forward, and you are nothing but a case study. It was not a threat. It was a verdict, delivered with the detached tone of a teacher noting an error. Varix ordered a counteroffensive, desperate to restore control. The fleets surged toward the human vessels, but they did not fight as other species did. They vanished behind rippling cloaks, reappeared at knife's edge, crippled ships, and slipped away again. Every move deliberate, every strike measured. He felt the shape of it now. The humans were not improvising. They had rehearsed this, waited for this, sharpened their blades in shadow, while the galaxy ignored them. When the third wave came, the core lines were already fraying. Communications were jammed not with noise, but with precise silence, entire frequencies swallowed before commands could pass through. Engines sputtered as codes embedded in the very system cores shut them down from within. The young commander, Thra's bravado, faltered. She stared at the chaos, then at Varix. "This is no prey, Admiral. They are hunters." Varix could not deny it now. His mandibles clenched, but his mind began to turn in ways he had not allowed for years. He had to understand them. When the human ships retreated suddenly, as if content to leave the fleet crippled but not destroyed, he stood motionless at the viewport. They could have annihilated them. Instead, they had chosen restraint. That unnerved him most of all. Later, in the dim silence of his quarters, Varix opened a captured data archive, fragments of human history intercepted from their networks. Grainy footage of fire and ruin filled his holoscreen. Cities leveled in wars they had inflicted upon themselves, seas filled with burning ships, skies dark with bombers. He saw them rise, fall, and rise again. Not once, but endlessly. They had waged total war against their own kind for millennia, and each time they emerged harder, sharper, more ruthless. They did not break. They adapted. Every wound became a lesson, every disaster a forge. One file showed the detonation of a weapon so vast it flattened entire cities in a heartbeat. Varix leaned closer, transfixed and horrified, as the fireball consumed the horizon. The humans had not unleashed it on enemies, they had unleashed it on themselves. And still they survived. The realization clawed at him. The core had believed humanity naive, fragmented, vulnerable. But in truth, they were a species that had never known peace without struggle, never grown complacent. Their entire history was preparation for extinction. "They've been waiting for us," he whispered into the empty room, the words more confession than analysis. Every step they were waiting. He thought of the voice on the comms, calm and cold, not gloating, not pleading. It was the voice of a predator that no longer needed to prove itself. The voice of inevitability. For the first time in his long career, Admiral Varix felt the weight of inevitability pressing against him, and it did not belong to the core empire. He sat back, claws trembling against the console, the image of Earth's blue sphere burning in his vision. He knew the Council would laugh, dismiss it, continue their arrogance. But he also knew what he had seen. The war was no longer conquest. It was survival. And survival might already be out of reach. The council chamber gleamed with obsidian polish, its vaulted arches designed to impress awe and obedience. It was here that the fate of empires was usually decided with laughter and certainty, where the arrogance of conquest reigned unchallenged. Tonight, however, the atmosphere was brittle, as though a crack had formed beneath the marble floors. Admiral Varix stood before the gathered counselors, his armor dulled from the campaign, his posture rigid but not unyielding. His eyes swept over the semicircle of leaders, fat with complacency, intoxicated by centuries of dominance. He had brought them victory after victory, yet he knew words alone might not pierce their pride. "The humans are not what you believe," he began, his voice low but steady. "The colonies we took were shells. Their defenses were not absent, they were hidden. They wanted us to come closer, to think them weak. I have seen their true weapons. Their strategy is deliberate." Laughter burst from several counselors, echoing across the chamber like a slap. One elder leaned forward, her crest gleaming in the dim light. "You speak as if these primitives could rival the core empire. Do you forget who you serve, Admiral? We have annihilated empires that ruled before their sun first saw flame." "They are different," Varix replied, forcing each word through clenched mandibles. "They do not fear extinction. Their entire history is made of wars they inflicted upon themselves. They have tempered their species in fire, in ways we never conceived. When they strike, it is not out of desperation. It is method. It is patience." A younger commander scoffed, slamming his fist against the railing. "They hide behind shadows and tricks. Let them come into the open, and they will shatter like all the others. We should burn Earth and scatter their remains into void dust. Murmurs of approval rolled through the chamber. Varix felt the weight of their blindness pressing down. He could almost hear the echo of the human voice in his mind. You've been walking the path we set for you. He forced his claws flat against the podium. If you burn Earth, you ignite something you cannot extinguish. I tell you this because I saw it. Their fleets move without waste, without vanity. They do not fight for territory. They fight for survival. That is the difference. The counselor at the center, Chancellor Kaler, leaned forward. His face was carved into the permanent sneer of a ruler too long unchallenged. You tremble before shadows, Admiral. Perhaps you have grown weary of war. If so, you may retire your command. Others here are eager for glory. The chamber's younger commanders puffed their chests, basking in the Chancellor's words. Varix knew then that reason would not reach them. They saw only weakness in his warning. To them, fear was a flaw, never a signal. But inside, the Admiral's resolve hardened. He had carried the Empire's banners across galaxies, had reduced civilizations to ruin. Yet nothing unsettled him as much as the human silence, their precision, their restraint. The Council would not listen until it was too late. He lowered his head slightly in acknowledgement, masking his disdain. As you command. But when the tide turns, remember this moment. The Chancellor's crest pulsed smugly. There will be no tide. Only conquest. Humanity will be a footnote. The session ended in waves of arrogance, but Varix lingered in the corridor, his thoughts louder than the echoes of the chamber. His second, Commander Thra, approached, her earlier confidence dimmed by what she had witnessed in battle. Her crest now glowed a wary amber. They don't hear you, she said quietly. They don't want to. They cannot hear what they've forgotten, Varix answered. They've lived too long without predators. They think strength eternal. Thra hesitated, then asked, Do you believe we can win? The question hung heavier than any decree. Varix thought of the human fleets vanishing into shadow, reappearing only to cut where it mattered most. He thought of their calm voices, never hurried, never exultant. And he thought of their history, drenched in their own blood, each war forging them harder. No, he said at last, his voice quieter than he intended. Not as we are. Not if we treat them as prey. Thra studied him, her eyes narrowing, but she did not challenge his words. For the first time, she looked not like a soldier eager for glory, but like one who understood mortality. Days later, the Council's orders reached the fleet, advance deeper into human territory. Strike at their hidden bastions. Break them with overwhelming force. The command arrived with pomp and ceremony, as though victory were already carved into stone. On the flagship, Varix delivered the orders without inflection, his gaze fixed on the stars beyond the viewport. The crews cheered, but their voices wavered. They remembered the human ambush, the surgical strikes. Doubt had already begun to creep into their bones. As preparations continued, Varix withdrew again to his private chamber. He summoned more fragments of intercepted human history, desperate to understand them. Footage of armored soldiers trudging through mud, their faces hollow yet unbroken. Tanks grinding over ruined landscapes. Voices singing in defiance beneath firestorms. None of it spoke of weakness. What disturbed him most was not their capacity for violence, but their endurance of it. Other species avoided suffering. Humans embraced it, turned it into steel. He could not decide if they fought because they hated, or if they fought because they had never known another way to exist. He stared at the final image, a human soldier, battered and bloodied, raising a tattered flag atop ruins. Alone, yet unyielding. Varix felt something alien stir in him. Not hatred, not even fear, but a reluctant respect. He closed the file and sat in the dark, the hum of the flagship's engines beneath him. Outside, his empire marched toward a war it did not understand, led by leaders blind to the abyss waiting for them. Inside, he wrestled with the knowledge that he, perhaps alone, had glimpsed the truth. The humans were not prey. They were a mirror the galaxy had refused to see, and the reflection promised ruin. The fleet moved into human territory, like a beast wounded, yet too arrogant to know it was bleeding. Admiral Varix stood at the command dais, his claws folded behind his back, his expression carved from stone. Around him, the officers wore faces of pride thinly veiling unease. They cheered when the orders came to strike at humanity's hidden strongholds, but their voices wavered, hollow echoes of former certainty. They entered the system expecting resistance, but none greeted them. The planets hung in the void, silent, unguarded, their orbits empty of defenders. It should have been a gift. Instead, it gnawed at Varrix's instincts like acid. "Admiral," Commander Thra said, her voice taut. "Scans show no defenses." "Again, it's wrong." He nodded once. "That is their defense." The crew looked at him confused, but he did not explain. He had seen enough of humanity to know absence was as dangerous as presence. Then the void tore open. Not in one place, but in dozens, fractures of space blooming across the system, like wounds in the dark. Human fleets emerged, not lumbering into position but already moving, already firing. They had been waiting, patient and silent, cloaked just beyond perception. The first wave of attacks gutted the outer core lines. Precision strikes severed engines, disabled comms, decapitated command ships before orders could even ripple outward. The galaxy had always believed humans disorganized, reckless, emotional. What Varrix saw now was terrifying in its clarity. Each move was calculated. Each kill was chosen. "Return fire." Thra barked, her crest flaring with urgency. The fleet responded, plasma lances lighting the void, but they struck only shadows. Human ships vanished into wormholes, reappeared behind their prey, dismantled them, then slipped back into darkness. It was not war as the Tkor understood it. It was extermination carried out with the dispassion of surgeons. Varrix felt his chest tighten, not with fear of death, but with the knowledge of truth. The Council had never listened. They had called him cautious, old weary. Now their empire was unraveling before his eyes, not slowly, not with attrition, but with merciless speed. "Admiral," Thra shouted, "our flanks are collapsing. They're inside our command net." He turned, his voice sharp but controlled. "Hold formation. Every ship that breaks will die faster. Discipline is survival." The words steadied some, but he knew it was only a delay. Already human drones swarmed their systems, disabling weapons, cutting power. Entire cruisers went dark, left floating like carcasses. Then the human voice came again, clear across every channel. "Come, unshaken. We warned you. This was never conquest. This was instruction. Now you will learn." Varrix's mandibles tightened. Around him, officers flinched. Some hissed in fury, others looked away in dread. He forced himself to meet the silence that followed, because he understood what it meant. The humans were not here for vengeance. They were here to end illusions. The battle raged, but was already decided. The humans struck with unerring efficiency, dismantling fleets that had once ruled galaxies. The Tkor ships broke formation despite his commands, scattering in panic, only to be picked off one by one. Every escape route collapsed under sudden wormhole incursions. Hours passed like minutes, and when it was over, the once proud armada was in ruins. Fires burned silently across the void, fragments of shattered hulls drifting without purpose. The humans did not celebrate. Their fleets hung motionless, as if waiting for the galaxy itself to absorb the lesson. Varrix stood rigid on the cracked bridge of his flagship, smoke curling from ruined consoles. The crew looked at him, broken, waiting for orders that no longer mattered. He opened his mandibles to speak, but before he could, the human voice returned. "You are beaten. We do not seek your extinction. We offer you survival, but survival under our order. Resist and you will vanish. Submit and you will endure." The words were not triumphant. They were cold, merciless, but beneath them was a strange restraint. The humans had won utterly, yet they offered terms. Thra whispered, almost to herself, "They don't want revenge. They want control." Varrix closed his eyes briefly. He thought of the Council, of their laughter and pride, of their blindness. He thought of the human histories he had studied, wars that had consumed their world, weapons that had scarred their own sky. They had not emerged from peace. They had been born from war, every generation sharpened by the one before. He opened his eyes and spoke into the comms, his voice carrying the weight of surrender. "This is Admiral Varrix of the Tkor. I accept your terms." The silence that followed felt heavier than battle. Then the human reply came, simple, final. "Then you will serve as bridge. Your empire will obey through you. This is the only path left." The transmission ended, and the void was quiet again. Around him, the crew sagged, some in despair, others in muted relief. The war was over, though none of them could yet grasp the scope of what had shifted. Later, when the fires were dimmed and the survivors counted, Varrix stood alone at the viewport, staring at the human fleets. They did not swarm the way victors often did. They held their positions like sentinels, as though the galaxy itself had been entrusted to their watch. Thra approached, hesitant. "You bent, Admiral. They will call you traitor." He did not turn to her. "No, they will call me alive. And perhaps, in time, they will call me necessary. Better that than ash." Her crest dimmed in somber agreement, and she left him with his thoughts. He gazed at the human warships, their silhouettes sharp and unyielding against the stars. He thought of the Council, now irrelevant, their voices silenced by the inevitability they had refused to see. He thought of the humans themselves, not as conquerors, but as a force the galaxy had awakened too late to resist. They never wanted war, he murmured to himself. But now that they have it, they will not let it go. The truth settled over him with a weight he could not shake. Humanity had revealed its face, and it was not the face of prey, nor even of predator. It was the face of inevitability, the face of a species that had clawed itself through endless cycles of death, and risen each time harder, colder, unstoppable. Varrix's reflection in the viewport looked back at him, weary and changed. He realized that his survival had a purpose beyond his own life. He was to carry the truth to those who still doubted, to bridge the chasm between empires, to serve as witness. Behind him, the stars burned silently, but in his mind he heard the echo of the human voice one final time. The galaxy will change. And he knew, with a certainty sharper than fear, that it already had.